We are here doing another interview. I have asked one of our wholesalers and friends to come on. We have a special spin on the subject today because I would consider you an expert in a certain category. And we wanted to ask you for your expertise on that. And so everybody welcome David. And David, tell us just a little bit about yourself. How did we meet, first of all?
So just like the short version is that I'm a lawyer. And I started reselling, I guess it's a year ago. I'm trying to remember when I started with you guys. I think like a little less than a year. But my mom had always had her own store, and she retired a couple years ago and just was really bored. And so my sister and I were trying to think of something that would get her to feel more engaged. And so we came up with maybe doing an eBay store, Poshmark Closet, with her, and that we would handle the shipping and all of the tech stuff. And she would just, help with the sourcing or just the creative kind of vision. And so, yeah, we started that and then launched into wholesaling with you guys. And then subsequent to that, started a wholesaling website.
Yeah, and you were one of our first wholesalers too, is that right, Nikki? One of the OGs for sure.
Oh yeah, David's for sure an OG. Honestly, the time that we've worked together has been great, and
I agree.
David's a blast for sure. So
Thank
I'm glad
you.
We got to share him with you guys today, and let him introduce himself a little bit to you guys. He reached out pretty early on in our wholesaling journey, and right from the get-go had just a great personality, had great items, had great pricing, and it was just really hard to not want to continue to work with David.
Yeah, it was a really good connection from the get-go.
Yeah, and it's grown a lot.
Yeah.
I think the first couple of calls we had were not like anything super major. David holds the record for the most I've ever purchased on a wholesale call.
Oh.
He also holds the
didn't know
record
that.
for the only wholesale call I've ever had where I didn't pass on a single item.
Yeah, I'm very proud of that.
We should have gotten you a medal.
I feel like I got one. Just,
So honestly, the relationship's been great, and we've been working together for a while. And then when you were ready to branch out with your website, we were fully glad to support that and help you get that off the ground.
Yeah, you were definitely, I remember talking to you about it like very early on when it was just like this very rough idea, and I knew like goals in terms of what I wanted it to be, but as far as executing it, just had no concept of exactly how it's going to work. And we went through a bunch of different kind of versions, and you were so helpful. It was great.
That's one of the things that I think gets misconstrued in reselling a lot is people don't want to help their competition. And I think it could have been so easy for really any reseller to look at helping another reseller create a website, or really just honestly anything. I just see so much negativity of people not wanting to help each other, and like our relationship has just never been that way.
No, not
and
at all.
I love that about our relationship as far as wholesale goes. Very open, and there's enough to go around and different.
Yeah, and what was so cool was, I mean, it would have been possible that you could have taken the position that like you're going to wholesale other people too. Like if you have good stuff, we want it. Yeah. Because you guys are always like able and willing to buy like as much as I have to sell. I never got that like sense from you at all. You were just always very like open to just helping, which was great.
It's one of my favorite things about you. I'm sorry, I'm really putting you on the spot today. Like,
Make him
stop.
blush.
That's okay.
But you're just super open, and I don't want anybody here to think that this has totally just been David bouncing ideas off me, because there's a lot of times where I come to David and I say, hey, I'm really...
Well, later on.
Yeah, but I'm really contemplating this option, this topic. What does this look like for you? Can you give me some feedback? So it's definitely been a two-way street. And really, I think one of my biggest ways, or the biggest reason I was so willing to support you, is because I always felt like you put us first. And even when you
do and will.
Even when you came to us, you were like, hey, nothing with us is changing, but I have some additional stuff that, you guys clearly aren't able to take. How can I, get this out there? So transparency's been huge, honesty's been huge, and honestly, like, just loyalty.
Yeah.
knowing that like I'd do anything for you and you would do anything for us as well to make each other's businesses successful, and it's been great. So the connection's been
absolutely
phenomenal.
And the thing that's nice just in terms of the loyalty back and forth is that when I've had like a bunch of stuff that I think you guys will like, you've made time for me at crazy times of the day, or we've had 3 or 4 buy calls in a week. And certainly when I think that it's something that you guys would like, I feel like I'm excited to show it to you because like I think it will be good for your business, or items that you bought from me in the past that did really well. So yeah, so like I said, it's definitely a two-way street.
I like that.
Your journey all the way up till now, a lot has changed, and I think your business has grown just in terms of wholesale. I want to turn the dial back a little bit. You mentioned that this whole thing started because your mom wanted to start reselling.
Yeah, or needed something to do that was like similar to what she knew in her own business for 30, 35 years. And this was the closest thing that would still allow her to not have to go to a physical like brick and mortar every day.
Yeah, that's like the dream job too. I just want to shop and I want to be creative, and that's all I care about.
Yes. Once she's earned, at 82, she's earned the right to, to have a dream job. So
yeah, so tell me a bit more about that. I guess, how did her reselling business start? Like, I guess what even made her want to get into reselling? And then I guess up to the point where you're at now.
Her parents had a liquidation business, and it was like everything from like clothes, like department store closeouts, to like furniture, to other stuff. And so she was always used to being around like a lot of things, whether it's clothes or other things. And she always really liked clothes and like shopping. And it just started very small. Somebody had an existing business and they were retiring. And so it was just somebody she knew casually and didn't really have an intention of starting her own business, but it was just like this perfect opportunity. And so she started with that, and it was like mostly consignment, but then she started doing buy, sell, trade, a much like looser version than like the typical like buy, sell, trade stores.
Yeah.
But she really liked the idea of turning things around to like new people that would enjoy whatever it was as much as the previous people had. And so that's how she started. And that was like while I was like in middle school, I guess, that she started. So I was used to like hanging around the stores and just felt very comfortable like with the notion of reselling long before reselling was even a thing. And so yeah, so it was natural then when we were thinking about something that she could do, that we would do it online, because of course reselling has evolved from brick and mortar still exists, but certainly evolved in terms of the platforms.
Yeah. That's how you got involved in. So she took over a business. Is that my understanding correctly?
Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm.
She took over a business from a mutual friend or somebody she knew.
Yeah.
That turned into kind of like a consignment, curated thrift kind of deal.
And there were a bunch of stores, and it grew without her really even like intending. She didn't have a business plan necessarily, but it just was like a natural kind of outgrowth of, she just considered every customer to be like a friend, and was excited when people would find things that looked good on them, or that if they needed something for an occasion. And so so business just was really good, and there were other opportunities to take over other businesses, and yeah, like I said, it just grew way beyond what the original sort of concept was.
All right, that's the best way to grow too, like actually organic growth. And I think we're going to talk about probably why organic growth happened here in a little bit, but just to see something explode just organically, I think is amazing. And it's really a testament when somebody's business does to that they really are doing something right.
Yeah, I agree.
So she has this business and it's growing. How do we get from there to you actually being involved with reselling?
So there's like a span of time where I was like off going to school and practicing law, And my sister's a social worker, so she was never that interested really in the business. I always liked clothes, and I don't know, I was very like familiar with brands, and I used to do the sort of buy sell trade part. So I liked like deciding what to take and like having a brand list and like looking for flaws and whatever.
And you said you'd been doing it since you were like a young teen,
Yeah,
too.
yeah. And the business was like, because it was a small family business, we would talk about it like all the time. So it was like at dinner or whatever, it was like often like the topic of conversation was like how the store did that day. So yeah, so it was just like part of my like growing up. And so it was easy then, time passes, and it was easy to see myself in the role of doing it with my mom, because it was not that different than like the way it had always been. I always was like really interested in like her books and like looking at numbers and like trying to figure out like what her like goals should be like financially for that year or that month.
The unfun side of it.
Yeah, exactly. And she was like very old school. She had like a notebook where she would like record all of the numbers from the different stores for the day and make little notes if it was like bad weather or something, or if it was like a holiday.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, it like was very helpful, but it just again was very like old school. Like nothing was on a computer. We would take out our notebook and just like figure that stuff out.
That's such an OG tip too, and that's something actually Nikki and I do in our business, and we recommend that everybody do, which is if something does happen like sales wise on a day, like you said it was raining, or maybe it was like not a good sales day because it was raining and nobody wanted to come in, or vice versa, or whatever, writing that stuff down, like huge tip to look back on for the next year.
It really helps because it makes such a difference when you're like projecting. And if you see that numbers were really bad on a certain day the previous year, that it was like not an organic thing. It was like because of some event.
Yeah. And that applies to reselling too. So you're currently talking about an actual physical location, but we use it in reselling, and it honestly works great as far as, like you said, projecting goes.
I always was like peripherally, like informally, like part of the business.
What made your mom quit the consignment?
She really didn't want to, but my sister and I were just concerned that she was just like pushing herself really hard, and just that she didn't need to, basically that she had worked hard for so many years and that she didn't need to like continue to get up every day and go to the store or whatever. And so it was very similar actually to what had happened to her. She knew somebody that was interested in taking over at least part of the business. And so when that happened, it was like meant to be, because it just felt very circular that somebody had been able to do that for her, and then she could do the same for somebody else.
Yeah.
Give somebody an opportunity who was really interested in having their own business, but it was just better to step into an existing one than start from scratch. You guys know starting from scratch is never easy.
You guys, not you decided for her, but as a family, you decide.
Yeah, I would say as a family.
Yeah, it's time to get out of this. She gets out of this, and then was the suggestion reselling?
It was interesting because she didn't really have hobbies. I don't know what my sister and I thought she would do with herself. We were like encouraging her to retire, but not really thinking of the fact that she didn't really do retirement kind of things. And she would just be at home on her computer and texting us about, like whatever site, this is like a great like deal. She was basically like working without a store because that was just like what she knew. And she had gotten like more recently, she had gotten into a lot of like online arbitrage and sourcing.
Yeah.
And so she was like still doing that. But we were just like, oh, that's great. What are you going to do with it? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
trying to stop the hoarder before the hoarding.
Exactly. And so then I was at a point with work where I was working from home after COVID. Like I really didn't need to go into the office, and a lot of my like hearings and things were all by phone. And so I was at home and we had space. And so it seemed just like a natural thing that we would run it out of our house, and that she, again, could do what she was doing. And just, I will often take a lot of pictures of things and send it to her, and she still like vetoes stuff, or she'll source and boxes will just show up at the house and I'll say, I guess you ordered this, or it's great. It definitely, again, it's still very much her vision. It's a lot of the stuff that she likes to sell that she had sold in brands she's familiar with. and feels comfortable selling is stuff that she wears. Yeah, so that's how it all came together.
So as far as obviously going through this evolution and taking over this business with your mom, a lot of what the business has been based on, just from my experience with you, is a lot of the connections that she was able to make.
Yeah.
So I think it's good for us to lead into that section. How did your mom go about all of that? What kind of connections does she have as far as sourcing wise? What does that look like for you?
Well, she has a lot of connections based on like many years in this business. She, again, like I was saying before, it wasn't intentional. She didn't set out to find somebody that would be like a great source, but it was just always very natural. She just talks to everyone and is really interested in everybody's story and is very happy sharing her story with anyone who's around. And yeah, it's just word of mouth. It's a lot of, oh, I wish I could have access to such and such, a certain designer or whatever. I would love to sell their things or find some of this stuff pre-owned. And somebody would say, maybe I know somebody who knows somebody else and I'll tell you who to call or they'll call you. And my mom was just like always very open to anything. Again, not ever thinking that it would lead to something specific, but just like chatting. And over the years, all of those things really built up. And it's interesting because now it's like other family businesses. So it would be like the kids of whomever took over the business. And so now it's like they're dealing with me and their parents were retired, just like my mom had been retired. So yeah, it's like family businesses, small businesses helping each other, a lot of it too, which again, like it just was very natural.
From talking to you too, that's what I think really helped evolve that journey for you, was your mom was buying so much, or you were buying stuff obviously on your own as well, and that's all the stuff you plan to put on your eBay site, and then all of a sudden you had too much stuff.
Yes.
And that's when you were like, hey, I have way too much stuff, what can we do? What made you decide to take wholesale as that route when you did have an abundance of stuff, rather than choosing to increase listings or choosing to just buy less yourself and just let your mom do the sourcing? What made you take it to the next level?
It was interesting because I have to like honestly give credit to you guys, because so I was watching your channel, like I like binge watched it. I had this like freak fall where I like fractured a couple ribs, which is like super painful, and it like hurt to breathe for 2 weeks. So I was just like laying in bed, and I had started getting interested in reselling, and literally watched like from your like the very beginning, watched like 4 years of like no, it's whatever, it was all good. And so you had started talking about, I think that you had maybe started like with trash pandas, and that was just like the very beginning of this idea that you guys could source like from all over the country and take advantage of like the fact that different people had different like access to different kinds of inventory. And I realized, but largely because of my mom's connections, but also connections that I was starting to make, that I just had access to a lot of things that other resellers would want. And it just seemed like, again, overwhelming for us to like take all that in. So I reached out to you guys, like again, early on when you were reselling. And then of course, like we talked about, it clicked. And so that was like the beginning. And then it was when we started talking about what I didn't want to, I felt like, you know, in terms of the way I wanted to structure something, that I wanted to do something else other than the buy calls that I have with you guys. And so, yeah, so we just started batting stuff around, and that was how it started to evolve.
I want to reel it back a little bit, because going back to your connections, and you do not need to say the brands that they are, but some of the connections that you have and access to inventory that came from your mom from many years ago, all the way leading up to now, to some of the connections that you have either passed down or created, that both of you have, are some really strong access to really good inventory that most resellers would never even dream that they had access to. And I'm not going to say the brands or anything, but I mean, you guys have access to like brands.
Yeah,
Brands.
We do. And that was also part of the reason that I started thinking about wholesaling, was I guess I had never really thought about what I had or could have like access to, and realized that, to me, wholesaling was not just about having stuff, like extra stuff, but it was about having really desirable stuff that would actually help somebody else's business and or be a helpful addition to, their existing inventory. And once I realized that I did have that opportunity, I really wanted to share it. And so yes, and then we did.
David is probably one of the most humble people I think I've ever met. Like, he could
I don't know about that.
totally go in the store and be like, I just need 5 items. I'm going to just pick up these 5 items for myself. But instead, he's like, there's 500 items. I'm going to pick them up for me, my neighbor, the next door neighbor, the neighbor next to them, and like all these other people that I know. And I think that's super intriguing, because a lot of people, I think, would only go and buy what they need for themselves, rather than really like expanding this market to be much bigger than what I think you probably ever imagined it would grow to.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. But I just get like excited about whether it's even the Poshmark or eBay or a wholesale, just like somebody just really, I don't know, like it making somebody's day, that whether it's like for their business or personally, that they are buying something that is a really good deal for quality merchandise. And it's nice, it feels good to be able to share that.
You do thrifting.
Yes.
So you do go shop thrift
I do.
stores, bins, things like that, but...
Not been so much, but only because I live outside New York City, and surprisingly, there are very few bins locations within in fact, there's one bins location in the city in Queens, and then another upstate in Rochester. And those are the only 2 bins in New York State.
Okay.
And New Jersey, it's down by Philadelphia. There's actually one in North Jersey too, but there aren't that many, considering like how many you would think there would be. Yeah, I know, it's counterintuitive, but they have a huge, the one in New Jersey especially has a huge like online auction site.
Okay.
And so a lot of stuff gets filtered through there, as opposed to like making it even to the stores or then to the bins.
Gotcha.
So yeah, but I love like any kind of thrift store, whether it's like a church thrift store or like a civic organization or like actual like chains.
Yeah. And then besides that, and I think this is probably going to be the most intriguing to viewers, is you also source, and again, you don't have to say exactly what, but tell us about your other sourcing. Like, just briefly, what does that look like when you go to those other places?
So it depends on where, and because a lot of these opportunities came along, as I said, very organically with my mom or with us, it's like very different. We have, at this point, have like a church that we deal with, and we make donations, and as opposed to necessarily buying the stuff, and because that was like their preference, and they had specific stuff that they whatever wanted to do, and we just started, it was like just from talking to people that we came upon that. So there's stuff like that. We know people that have fairly big thrift store chains, and we get access to stuff a lot of times before it goes out on the floor. And a lot of it too is my mom had done, again, not really realizing it would lead to anything, but like favors like for them, not even just like business related, but just like a place to stay if they were coming to Florida or whatever, or needed to borrow whatever. And so yeah, so those things just evolved over time into like much larger opportunities. Other people's businesses grew way beyond what they thought. And a lot of it too is the growth of this whole sort of thrifting, reselling, because a lot of these businesses were like OGs years ago, like my mom was, and as the sort of industry has evolved, like their businesses have grown. And so there's like much more for us to utilize than there might have been like at one time.
Yeah. A lot of different connections that you have made, and like you said, each of them are very individual. But what I'm hearing from a lot of them, and what viewers can take away, is if you are able to make connections, and we're going to talk about your tips on potentially how to do that, but I guess the benefits of having those connections, what I'm hearing is you may get first access before anybody else. You may be able to get possibly overage of what they're not able to handle. Or you may even sometimes information, like you might get tipped off of, hey, this is going to be happening at this time or whatever.
Yeah, all of that.
I
Yeah.
like too that it's like a trade of services. Sometimes I'm not going to go into your specifics because I think a lot of that's personal.
Yeah.
But I do think a lot of times, like, I'll talk to you and I'll say, hey, yeah, I'd be interested in these kind of items, but can we talk a brief cost of goods on these, so I can just let you know if I'm interested. And 9 times out of 10 you're like, oh, I didn't technically pay for it, I was able to give X, Y, and Z instead, or I was able to offer this, or it was based on a donation, or whatever that looked like. So
Yeah.
I think that's, I don't know, I call this like a kindness chain. I just think it's really interesting that this is going to sound judgmental, but of all places that I would not expect it would be like New York. Like, I just expected
Yeah.
a lot of them to be more cutthroat, I guess. So it's cool to hear that a lot of it's just, like you said, small businesses helping other small businesses to be successful.
Sure, and it can be cutthroat, but again, it's like my mom is like, as I said, she set the example. She's like she grew up in a really small town. She has that like mindset always, and it got passed along in terms of just being, like we said, just being kind and just thoughtful or considerate, and whatever happens. Sometimes it is a personal opportunity, sometimes it's a business opportunity, but usually 9 times out of 10 it comes back. Whatever you're putting out there comes back to you.
So you mentioned your mom had built a lot of relationships over time. Some of those were passed down to you, and then you've maybe even formed some new ones recently. We've already talked about the advantages of forming connections, which I think are pretty obvious. Are there any disadvantages that you'd say?
No, I can't really think of any. I think that the more, just in general, the more opportunities that anybody has, the better off. You don't have to necessarily take advantage of every opportunity, but it's just nice to know that they exist. And then you can decide to what extent that fits your business model or doesn't, or the way that I've done, just maybe change your business model to like suit whatever you have access to, which is maybe like a little bit backwards, but still it's made sense for us.
Yeah, it's a good shout out, just because I think even just from the Resellers Edge group that we have, there's a lot of times where I hear people say, I set my business model, but I'm having a really hard time making it work because I don't have the ability to purchase the items that I would expect to. So I think it's interesting to hear that you really set your mom's business plan or your like retirement plan based on working your business around your opportunities. And
Sure.
I think more people could definitely thrive from having that mentality.
I was asking about disadvantages because I wondered if by making all of these connections, in my mind, if I had all the connections that I know that you have, I wondered if a disadvantage would be that you felt a lot of pressure to maintain those relationships and keep everybody happy. And you said you don't have to take advantage of every opportunity, but I wondered if maybe that would be an issue where you felt pressure because someone is offering you something, but you're not able to take advantage of it at that time.
Yeah, the thing that's nice is that when the relationships develop and it just becomes somebody that you're friends with, then you don't really have to worry because then it's understood and they know if, I don't know, like maybe business was slow and like we couldn't take advantage of a certain opportunity, but there's no sort of ill will because again, like it's formed like out of a relationship that's like genuine and not just about business.
That makes total sense.
Okay.
So if you were to give someone advice about how to start making connections similar to yours, what advice would you give them?
I was thinking about a couple months ago, this is just an example, but so I saw like online one of these like estate sale like sites that somebody was having like a big yard sale and it was like an hour and a half away, so it was like not super convenient, but it was something I could fit in like that day, and there were some pictures. It wasn't like specific in terms of like the clothing that was available, but it was just like heaps of clothes, and it just seemed like unusual for just like a typical yard sale to have such an amount of stuff. So anyway, so I went, and it was like this really nice older woman. There was a crazy amount of stuff there. A lot of it like seemed like it was from like department store pallets like Nordstrom Returns, and I still don't really know exactly where she like got all this stuff from, but she was like needing to downsize and sell her house, and just, I don't know if she was going to do a business and then didn't, or maybe she had access or clearly has access to a ton of stuff, but then didn't really know what to do with it. I started buying her stuff way beyond just even, I didn't even realize there was stuff in her bed. There was stuff all over. It wasn't even just what was like in her yard. And that was the last thing that I expected when I was like, oh, I'll just check out this yard sale. And that became, I bought hundreds and hundreds of things from her, and it's really good, like good merchandise. And so I think that the moral of all that is that I think it's really good to just take advantage of opportunities and switch up stuff. Like typically, I go to yard sales every once in a while, but it's not like a consistent thing. But if I hadn't just like decided, oh, well, let's just see what's there, I never would have had that opportunity. So I think that it's difficult. I think when people put pressure on themselves to like network, or I'm gonna make 5 connections this month or whatever, it doesn't always pan out, and then you feel disappointed in yourself.
Yeah.
But I think if people just took advantage of just new opportunities, just did different stuff or switched up like their routines without thinking it would lead to anything, probably it will at some point. And it might not be for a while, but if you go in with no expectation of, then you're not disappointed.
Yeah.
And that's, again, like how my mom made so many relationships, and that's like the way that I have too. And they add up after a while.
Yeah, the themes I have taken, because I have learned a lot about connections, specifically in this interview, because I knew part of your story, but not all the little details of it. So it's been really interesting, and thank you for sharing all those. But the themes that I keep hearing between the connections your mom made and also the connections you made is they're happening organically. You're not trying to force them. You are switching things up, and you're not expecting things out of people. You're trying to make a genuine connection with someone so that it's an organic connection. And I also heard a couple times, I think you talked about give and take on a couple of things. So you're solving a problem for someone sometimes, and they're able to solve a problem for you too. But it sounds like a lot of these connections too, they're like, would you say a lot of them are built up over a longer period of time?
Sure. Some are like this elderly woman that had all this stuff, where I went there thinking I would find a couple of things and left with 500 pieces.
Yeah.
That was like in an afternoon. But again, some other relationships have developed over really long periods of time without ever even thinking that they would develop into anything like business related.
Yeah, I love the not having expectations going in either. As you were talking, for some reason, the, I guess, thing I kept hearing is you can't keep doing the same thing and expect like a different result. So switching stuff up, like you're talking about, just taking advantage of new opportunities, I think is great. Is that what you're taking away from it? Like I'm taking away like things just, I think you're right. People try to force connections so much, but really these good long-term relationships do happen organically, whether they're an afternoon that you just happened upon or they're long relationships build up over time, and just genuinely trying to get to know someone. I know Nikki does that in thrift stores too, where she'll just, no expectations, she's just genuinely talking to some of the people that we see every day at the thrift store, and those have just organically led into some connections too, where we might get, no, I don't want to say we go into back rooms and get access, because that's not true, but tips off to stuff, and we're at the beginning of our connection game learning, so we got some stuff to learn from you for sure.
Yeah, we've definitely gone places where I've had like employees that have saved back brands that they know that that we buy, that we'll bring them out on the sales floor for us when we get there. I've had some that will wait and put new racks out when they know that they know that we come every Monday or every Wednesday, and that we come around the same time, so that they'll hold out and wait for us to get there to be able to source them. And just honestly, it's just all being nice to people and just talking. Sure, you could walk into the store and just say, hey, I want you to show me all your new stuff, and I don't want you to show it to anybody else. But like, how rude does that sound? And I just love talking to people and going in and just hanging out and having fun. I'm going to be there anyways, so if I can make somebody smile while I'm going to be there, like that's the goal. Let's all be a little bit less miserable. And it's definitely turned out to be beneficial, which I'm obviously super grateful for, but that's not why I do it either. It's just...
Yeah, and I think you make a really good point in terms of just being yourself. And for me, I'm much more of a one-on-one person. I will get reserved in bigger groups, and I'm not the kind of person that would feel comfortable, I don't know, like going to the manager of a store and like having a proposal, like I would just feel like very like embarrassed, or like I was like in the way, or like they were busy and I was like inconveniencing them, or just all of those things. And like, again, like you are just like a very like people person, and that's just like naturally who you are. And so like when you go out into like the world, whether it's a thrift store or like any other setting, you're just like yourself, and whatever happens, and a lot of times it's like really good things that happen. And I feel like, again, I am much better just like relating to somebody like in a conversation as opposed to a big group or having a motive.
Yeah.
And again, it just, you know, it evolves just from just being who you are and not feeling like you have to. If you're not comfortable being the super aggressive, I'm gonna network and whatever, it probably won't work if that's like not who you actually are, or if it's just like what you feel like you need to do for your business to be successful.
I think that's why we're friends.
Yeah, I think so too.
We're the same person in and out. I always compare it to networking or making connections, selling a car. So if you guys have ever gone to a car dealership and the moment you park, they like run out. They're super aggressive and they like run to your car. What do you need? What are you looking for? What brands? What's your checklist? You don't want to shop there anymore.
Right.
They're just so
Sure.
aggressive. And networking can really be the same way, where it almost just, it's just too suffocating.
Sure.
And if you go to a car dealership and you have a chance to look around a little bit and somebody wanders out and they say, hey, my name's David, I'm here if you have any questions, I'll be inside, first desk to the right if you need me, let me know if I can get any keys for you or anything, but I'll be around if you need anything. I'll check back in with you in maybe an hour or something if you need something. Or do you want me to check back? Most times that person, they're more likely to come back in and say, hey, actually I do want to check this out, because they don't feel so suffocated. And I think most resellers run to these employees or run to these connections and they just immediately want from the get-go, and they just feel suffocated. So it's nice to just have someone who just genuinely cares about them as a person and isn't just chasing the next like free deal.
And nobody wants to be just like the object of somebody's like ambition or whatever for their business to go to the next level, like on somebody else's shoulders. And that comes through, even if you think you're being very like slippery and just you're like working the situation. Most of the time, the other person is very aware that's what's happening and is just like from the get-go not going to respond well.
One of the best connections that you made, in my opinion, was your wholesaling relationships. So I wanted to talk about that really quick. So you mentioned this kind of whole thing evolved into wholesaling from having realization like, hey, I have access to a bunch of stuff that resellers want. Plus, I have excess inventory. Like I have an abundance of being able to get this stuff, and there are resellers looking for it. So those are the connections you made through wholesaling. I'm gonna let Nikki take this question, but you're definitely slightly different than some of the other wholesalers we have in terms of your business policies and stuff.
So as far as, obviously we've talked a little bit about evolving your business from really being just a reselling model for you and your mom and your sister, her too, although mostly you and your mom, and just leading through that transition. Obviously you had the abundance, like Kaylee said. You decided you wanted to give other wholesalers the opportunity. You said you found the YouTube, which led you to us. But as far as like setting up your policies, your procedures, like figuring out exactly what you wanted to do to become a wholesaler, like what made you pick the methods that you did? Your pricing, your methods, your items that you're picking up, like what made you really shape your wholesale business to be the way that it is today?
I mean, there are a couple things. You know, first of all, I wanted to be very transparent, like just about everything, because that's what I would expect, or to me, that's what would make a beneficial relationship. And I also started with this idea that it didn't matter, you know, what I like paid for something or didn't pay for something, that like things have a value, and basically it's like up to the reseller to determine that value, which is why, you know, I always ask you, if we're talking about pricing, like what you think an item's going to sell for, not even just like what you're going to list it at, but what you actually will sell it for. Because then if I feel comfortable that you're comfortable with whatever ultimately the price is going to be, then I base my price on your price. Because again, like it doesn't matter how I came upon stuff, and it's not just things that I maybe didn't pay much for, but let's just say, I don't know, I paid a lot for something, but still, like if you're only going to sell it for, it doesn't matter what I pay for it or what I have in it. And I think that's a lot of resellers start with this idea, which again, I totally understand. Everyone wants to have a profitable business, of course, but like you're in charge of making your business profitable. It's not like up to your customer to make it profitable for you. And you need to learn what stuff is going to sell for, not just what you think it's worth, but what I always, when I talk to a potential customer, I always ask if they feel comfortable with me looking through their site and looking through their solds to get an idea of what their pricing is like, because everyone prices stuff differently. And to me, that's really important, because if I'm going to wholesale to you, I'm doing it to help your business, right? And so that's one thing that we set up from the very beginning that I think can be different. If there's any sort of flaw at all, if it doesn't get to you in like saleable condition, then we'll refund you the amount. And there have been times when I didn't even realize, because I wasn't like paying that much attention, that you like only charge like half or whatever because you were just being really nice, and it's much appreciated. In terms of that policy, again, that was like, I'm providing a service, and the service is to like provide items for people to sell. So if it's flawed and they're not going to be able to sell it for what they thought they could, or they have to put extra work in it, to me, it's like only reasonable that I should eat that cost. And I know that's also different than perhaps like other people run their businesses. And again, everybody like should run their business the way that they feel comfortable with. Like I knew from the very beginning what I felt comfortable with, and that was what it was and what it is.
You definitely gave me a very different perception on wholesaling, so shout out to David for that.
Well, thank you.
But you definitely gave me a really different mindset for it. So as a reseller, we all know that market value is market value, right? It doesn't matter. You sell for an item, whatever it is. It doesn't matter how much we spend on it. The item is only worth how much the item's worth.
Absolutely.
And a lot of wholesalers that we work with or have tried to work with in the past will say, I paid 10, I need to make an extra 5, so I need you to buy this for 15, but it's only selling for 30. And that's a common issue that we run into, you know, as we go through wholesalers. And that's one of my favorite things about you is I have the opportunity to comp them in real time, talk to you and say, look, I get it. But at the end of the day, like I can only sell this for 35, and it's super negotiable. Sometimes we get super surprised and we're like, wait, holy moly.
And that's
like,
great too.
This is a holy grail. Like we definitely need to give you some extra for these. But then there's those moments where we were like, okay, no, this is not selling for as much as what we thought it would.
Which is always fine with me, because again, like to me, that's like the whole point of, you know, the business part of the relationship is, again, like for it to be, why would you like buy from me if it was not like advantageous for you?
I like too that it's almost on an honor system. I'll try to give you more when I can,
and you do. And if you think that something's going to sell, there are definitely times, although I've learned a lot about pricing just from like the way that you guys price. But yeah, there are times when you'll say, I think, like when I ask you, what do you think that this will sell for? And you'll say an amount that like really surprises me because it's like much higher than I like would have thought. And then you base what you think is reasonable to pay on that amount, which is again like much more than I might have thought. It works both ways.
Yeah, I like that it's definitely a very distinct working relationship that we can openly have conversations about what stuff is worth and how we can get you obviously extra funds when we can and make sure that it's beneficial for both of us. And I like that you're willing to just be so easygoing when it comes to the flaws. I think you're probably the easiest going that I have. You're like, just send me a total, it's fine, I'll pay it out. But I like that we can give you the feedback. These are what we're seeing, these are the flaws that we're seeing, and you do take the time to really check, double check, triple check. You have a friend that also helps and double checks as well. And I think that's another added benefit as well, that you guys are so flexible to make changes as need be. And you do a lot of research. You probably are the wholesaler that I have that does the most research. Most times, David will get on a call and he'll say, hey, I saw that you sold that cardigan I sold you 2 months ago for $35. And I'm like, I don't even know where that cardigan came from at this point. But he's like, yeah, it was this brand and I got it in this color and this was the size. And I'm like, How do you remember half of that stuff?
You guys make it easy because, of course, like Haley's doing videos on, if everybody was doing videos on what stuff they sold and like for how much, then I could do that for every customer. But yeah, it's not just stuff that I sell you guys, but the stuff that you source yourselves or that you buy from other wholesalers. Yeah, it's just really interesting. And it's stuff that I absorb. And there are times when I'll say to you, Haley said that such and such item is really hot now, or something's really trending, and you'll say, okay, all right.
Yeah, there's been a lot of moments where David, hey, I picked this up because it's style based, and I'm like, I don't know, because I haven't come across it yet. And then I'll comp it, I'm like, oh, all right, put it in the bag. Let's go. Like, totally worth it. So I think that's like the best part about a relationship is that it's definitely not all me schooling you. There's so many moments where you come in and you're like, hey, do you know about this brand? There's so many brands that you come across I've never heard of before, and I look them up and I'm like, wow, this is really great, or this size has a really great sell-through rate. And I love that we have that ability to ebb and flow from each other and really learn from each other.
Yeah, and speaking of learning from each other, one of the other sort of things that it all happened around the same time, but in terms of like the inventory that I was finding to wholesale, it started when you guys started Reseller's Edge. So that was what, like the beginning of the year? Mm-hmm. And I started learning so much about style-based stuff that I was just not at all aware of, and like all the sort of terms and the ways to list certain things. And I started picking up those kinds of pieces, and it was really cool because a lot of those pieces, I was surprised. There were resellers who would buy just like 25 just only like style-based things, and I realized it's not only like inventory that I have access to that again are like very like high sell-through rate, whether it's brand or a lot of times if it's like plus size, that's frequently a higher sell-through rate just like in general, but also that it could be just like things that I think are cool or stuff that I learned about in the group, and that there was like a lot of interest in those pieces also. So it opened up even more doors in terms of what I could wholesale and what like people wanted. And it always interests me, like especially customers I have that do buy more style-based stuff. I always, and if there's, I don't know, an item that I really thought was like super cool and I'm like very interested, I always say like, just let me know what you ultimately sell it for, how long it takes to sell, because that's like very satisfying to know that, you know, that I found something that I just heard about in one of our calls and can sell it to somebody else who appreciates it and then is able to pass it along is neat.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think definitely differentiates you from other resellers is that you're very long-term focused with your relationships through and through, and I think that's how you're able to make so many connections. Even like what you just said, like with style-based things, you're asking, let me know how this pans out. You're always looking for the future and for a more long-term relationship instead of a short-term gain, and I think that really differentiates you and why you're so successful.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But I also think a lot of it is, again, it goes back to what we were talking about before, which is that I don't even necessarily think about it as helping to create a long-term relationship as much as I just am like psyched when somebody has a good sale or sells something that they didn't expect would sell for as much as it did. And it just makes my day. It's nice if and when that happens. And so a lot of times then that just develops a relationship, and then who knows where that will lead. But it starts with just, again, like genuinely like caring about somebody else's business, because again, like I'm providing a service, which is to provide merchandise, which is to help somebody succeed. And that's just the way that I looked at it from the very beginning.
We super appreciate you, and
well, thank you.
I've definitely learned a lot from you tonight about building those relationships and connections. So let's talk about where people can find you, because you've started some new ventures recently. You guys have already mentioned the website, and I know, Nikki, I heard you in the background discussing it when you were first creating it, and I know you've tested out a couple things. I think you mentioned already, but you have access to a lot, and you're now offering it to other people.
Yeah.
You've got your website now.
Yes.
You want to chat about that a little bit?
Sure.
And where people could find you?
Absolutely. I wanted to, again, this goes back to providing a service. I wanted to do something different for people that maybe didn't have time for like buy calls because they maybe like work during the day or they resell part-time. And, that was like efficient for me also. And so again, like after sort of going through a bunch of different like possibilities and like trying out some stuff that were like glitchy at first or
major messes.
Yeah, pretty major that I definitely learned a lot from. And also just like learning from customers. It's funny because your mom was actually my first customer.
Really?
And as soon as she got the order, I was like, just like some constructive criticism, like, and she was like very honest. And said, whatever, the idea is great, but there are some things with the execution, like maybe you could change. And it was like harder to find items than perhaps most customers would want. And those were things that then like we incorporated and tried to figure out like how to, I mean, you can't unfortunately make people happy all the time. But again, like all of these suggestions were like very reasonable and ultimately like doable. And so, yeah, so we set up our own site and we are still working with, there's a lot of inventory. I think there's like over 1,000 pieces. And you were so right, because you were like, that might be a little overwhelming. But I just was happy about, I think, just offering this stuff out in the universe. And so then we've been trying to have different categories and just make it easier for people to browse and buy and not have to necessarily scroll through the entire thing. And so we've been able to do that, which I think has been really effective. We've gotten like good feedback from customers, which is, again, ultimately what is the most important thing. So my mom's name is Terry. And so both the eBay business and then the wholesale is Terry Turns Around. So the site is www.terry, you'll probably have it. Like
I'll link it down below for you.
But terryturnsaround.com. And it's gotten to a point where it seems like very user-friendly. Yeah. People can just pick whatever items they want and pay through PayPal, like very automatic. And we have been able to, again, come up with a more efficient way to inventory everything or to like assign SKUs so it's easy for us to find and pull and get the orders out quickly. So yeah, so listen, there's always like places to improve, but I am like happy that within a fairly short time that we've been able to again like take what customers really care about, and time is valuable for everybody. And so just like trying to find ways to not have it take so much time. So yeah, so that's where we're at with that. But and also, as I was saying, like expanding the things that we have, I was trying to think of like different categories and doing like some style-based, like cottagecore or whatever categories, so that if somebody is interested in like experimenting with like certain aesthetics, that they can buy for a very like reasonable price, just to try out like a bunch of different pieces and see how it does for them. So yeah, so that's has been happening, and we're like trying to expand even more categories to make, again, it more user-friendly.
I think one of the things I love the most about your site, especially for your style-based pieces, is that a lot of times you'll put style-based coquette piece, style-based fairy piece. Like, you can tell you're using a lot of the keywords that you obviously have gotten a lot from Reselling.
Oh, sure, a lot.
But I think that it's interesting because it's almost coaching to expand in style-based stuff. By giving them some of the keywords that they need to really sell those items. And as you mentioned, prices are probably the most reasonable I've seen across the board. And you do discounts all the time, which is super cool. Something doesn't sell, I don't know what your policy is for how long, but...
Well, there isn't like a strict policy, exactly.
Discounts, which I think is really cool. Like I was on there the other day. It's been a good minute because most of the time we're just doing calls together. But there's a lot of like really cheap, good quality pieces.
Well, thank you. That is like the intention. And I like want for other resellers to, again, feel comfortable with experimenting from, the comfort of like their sofa, as opposed to like a lot of resellers not even complain, but just have concerns about finding inventory or sourcing, because again, they don't have access. They're super far from like thrift stores, they are raising a family and just busy with other stuff. And so to the extent that like I can provide like variety at a reasonable price, so again, people can check out brands. I was mentioning like plus size. A lot of people don't have access to a lot of plus size pieces. And to me, plus size pieces, again, are a great market with just like a sort of intrinsically high sell-through rate, regardless of even what, brand it is. And so, so being able to, again, offer that into the universe is nice.
You're absolutely right. There are a ton of people looking for wholesalers. I love that wholesaling is, it's just so new within the last year in the reseller world. So I think it's cool that you're a part of the beginning stages of that. And I'm excited to see where your website evolves as you get more customer feedback and everything. But hopefully the viewers don't crash your website. But it is a public website. It's a public website, and they are welcome to shop it,
Absolutely.
right?
I would love for anybody to just to browse.
To browse,
Yeah, and just see what we have. And it changes all the time. We are starting with like official weekly. It's
drops.
Yeah, it's going to be on Mondays. Yeah, drops. But again, there's stuff that's marked down every week also. So like maybe if somebody like didn't want to try something out at like $5, but then it's marked down to $3.50 or whatever, they would feel more comfortable just experimenting.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff happens all the time. I try to like definitely stay on top of the markdowns as much as I'm staying on top of like the new merchandise.
So definitely go check out his site, get yourself some merchandise, check out some deals that are going on. Hopefully we don't crash the site, but we'll see.
Okay.
If you do
it.
So go check that out. I'll have everything linked down below and also on the screen for you guys. I think I'll probably do a little show of the website, so they'll have seen it on there. But thank you so much for coming on, David. Did you have anything that you wanted to say that maybe I didn't ask you?
No, I think you guys have covered like everything. But it's just been really nice to I mean, I talked with Nikki like how many times like during the week, but it's nice to be able to talk to you too.
Yeah.
And, just as I said, I learned so much from the class, that I've been able to like use in my business like very quickly, which has been great also.
How mad are you going to be at me after they buy everything on your site and you have to ship it all?
Ooh.
I think that's a problem that we'll be able to work through. I won't be too mad.
Okay, I decided at the end of every interview, we are asking these same questions. So the question is, what is the difference between a reseller who wants to succeed and a reseller who actually succeeds?
Oh God, that's like a hard question. I wish I had known. I come up with the answer ahead of time.
To be fair, I did not know either. So
Okay.
I did not leave you hung out to dry.
I think that, again, whether it's, again, like a wholesaler or a reseller, you need to start from the perspective of providing a service for customers and what a customer is looking for and marketing to different kinds of customers. And so I think that approach is like what sets successful resellers apart, as opposed to just thinking of like the business like as like stuff that you want to sell, but instead like thinking about making it so that it's things that people want to buy. Again, whether it's like eBay customers or other resellers if you're wholesaling.
Love it.
I love that.
Thanks so much for coming on, David. And thanks everybody for watching. If you have any questions for David, put them in the comments down below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. That way you get notified of every single interview we do. And if we get enough questions, we'll have to convince David to come back on.
Wow, thank you.
All right, bye guys.